46 tows of narcotics, 5 live IEDs, 1 warehouse in Florida. Tonight we expose who built it.
This is what danger looks like right here. Everything you see behind us, everything in front of us, is a red flag for disaster. Those words belong to Brevard County Sheriff Wayne Ivey. He spoke them standing inside a warehouse in Palm Bay, Florida, surrounded by towers of seized boxes stretching so far back into the building that cameras couldn't capture where they ended. In front of him, 12 rifles, 17 pistols, 2 fully automatic submachine guns, a .50 caliber mounted on a tripod, suppressors, 5 improvised explosive devices, grenade simulators, and 50 pounds of raw precursor chemicals capable of making even more. And behind all of that, 92,000 pounds of one of the most dangerous and misunderstood narcotics circulating in America right now. 92,000 pounds. That is 46 tons, seized from a single warehouse, in a quiet commercial strip in Central Florida, from a 26-year-old man his neighbors described as quiet, whose grandparents they called kind and friendly. What looked like a routine business was, in reality, the largest seizure of its kind ever recorded in the United States. Before we go any deeper into what was discovered inside that facility, if you want clear, fact-based breakdowns of real federal operations that the mainstream coverage glosses over, subscribe right now. Hit the bell, because this story is about far more than one man and one warehouse. The address was a commercial building in Palm Bay, Brevard County, Space Coast territory, the kind of area where industrial units line up next to auto shops and small logistics companies, and nobody asks too many questions. The business registered there operated under the name Overseas Organics. On paper, it processed botanical extracts. Invoices, shipping records, equipment, everything suggested a mid-sized herbal supplement operation. Nothing that would draw a second glance from a code inspector or a postal carrier dropping off packages. But in September of 2025, something small shifted. A narcotics intelligence unit flagged an unusual volume of outbound shipments from the facility. The quantities were inconsistent with any licensed botanical processing company. Analysts at the Brevard County Sheriff's Office began mapping the pattern. They brought in the Drug Enforcement Administration. They brought in the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. The Palm Bay Police Department assigned detectives. What started as a data anomaly became a structured, multi-agency investigation with one question at its center. What exactly was Overseas Organics producing, and where was it going? The answer came in layers. The substance at the core of the operation was 7-hydroxymitragynine, known in federal enforcement circles as 7-OH. It is a direct chemical derivative of kratom, a plant that has existed in legal gray zones for years, sold openly in gas stations, vape shops, and online wellness stores. But 7-OH is not kratom. When extracted in concentration and compressed into pill or gummy form, Sheriff Ivey confirmed it becomes, in his words, 13 times more powerful than morphine. It binds to the brain's opioid receptors with the same mechanism as prescription painkillers and illegal opioids. The FDA had already issued formal warnings. Florida Attorney General James Uffner had issued an emergency rule classifying it as an immediate danger to public safety and moving to ban its manufacture and sale statewide. The substance was no longer operating in a gray zone. It was illegal in Florida. Maxwell Horvath knew this, and he had a plan around it. Investigators working the case made undercover purchases from the facility beginning in September. Agents posed as buyers. They were sold the substance. On at least one documented occasion, an undercover operative was given a full tour of the interior. What the agent saw inside did not look like a supplement company. It looked, as Sheriff Ivey later described it publicly, like a set from a television production about industrial drug manufacturing, except this was real. Separate rooms, sterile environments, chambers dedicated to extraction, compression machinery lining the walls. A production line built for scale, not for small batches. Horvath's legal theory was as bold as it was flawed. Because Florida had banned 7-OH, he believed shipping the product to buyers in other states meant he was operating outside Florida's jurisdiction. He wasn't selling it in Florida, he told himself. He was exporting it, legally, and in his mind, that distinction was his protection. Make sure you're subscribed right now, because what comes next shows exactly how this level of arrogance combined with this level of criminal infrastructure creates a threat that goes far beyond narcotics. Here is what investigators found when they cross-referenced Horvath's operational history. In 2017, federal authorities convicted him on 2 separate federal charges: possession of an explosive device and trafficking in MDMA, the synthetic compound known commonly as Molly or ecstasy. Agents had previously intercepted approximately 500 grams of MDMA being shipped to Horvath from the Netherlands. He was sentenced to 2 years in federal prison and placed on federal probation following his release. He was, in the language of law enforcement, a career offender, not a first-time mistake. Not a young man who stumbled into something dangerous. A deliberate, repeat federal criminal who had served time, completed probation, and then rebuilt, bigger, more sophisticated, and significantly more dangerous. The decision to move on the facility came as the evidentiary record reached a threshold that left no room for legal challenge. The DEA, the ATF, BCSO, and Palm Bay PD coordinated the entry. Federal indictment paperwork moved through the system in parallel. This was not a reactive raid. It was a precision operation designed to close every exit simultaneously. When agents entered the Palm Bay warehouse, the first thing they encountered was volume. Row after row of sealed boxes, stacked floor to ceiling. Initial field testing confirmed the substance, 7-OH in concentrated form, compressed and packaged for distribution. The quantity was so large that when Sheriff Ivey stood at the front of the facility for press cameras, he gestured behind him and said, "This is just half of it. It goes all the way back." Agents worked through the inventory systematically. The final confirmed count, 92,000 pounds. 46 tons of a synthetic opioid-class compound. A street value, calculated by investigators, of $4.7 million. Then the weapons section of the facility came into view, and even experienced agents paused. 12 rifles, 17 pistols, 2 fully automatic submachine guns, modified to fire in continuous burst, the kind of weapons federally restricted for civilian ownership under any circumstance. Shotguns, suppressors, a .50 caliber rifle mounted on a fixed tripod, a weapon that, in the right hands, is capable of penetrating vehicle armor. Thousands of rounds of ammunition. And then, in a separate secured area, 5 improvised explosive devices. Functional IEDs. Not components, not materials, assembled devices. Alongside them, grenade simulators and 50 pounds of raw precursor chemicals sufficient to manufacture additional explosive ordnance. Palm Bay Police Chief Mariano Augello stood before cameras and did not mince words. We're not just talking about drugs. We're talking about explosive devices, things the military uses to take out populations of people. This is terrorist activity across the board. Horvath, as a convicted felon, was legally prohibited from possessing a single firearm. Investigators found dozens. How he obtained them remains an active line of inquiry. BCSO Public Information Officer Todd Goodyear confirmed agents were, in his word, surprised by the weapons cache. When pressed on the acquisition method, Goodyear stated directly, "We're not sure how he obtained the firearms. He is a convicted felon, so he couldn't purchase them himself." That gap in the record, the supply chain behind the arsenal, is now a central thread in the federal investigation. The charges filed against Horvath upon arrest reflected the gravity of what was found. 36 counts of possession of a firearm by a convicted felon. 1 count of possession of a short-barreled rifle. 2 counts of possession of a short-barreled machine gun. Additional charges tied to the explosive devices, the precursor chemicals, and the narcotics operation. Sheriff Ivey addressed the question of what Horvath intended directly. This guy was either looking to engage in war or looking to arm those who are. Federal indictments are pending. Horvath made his first appearance in federal court the day following his arrest. Prosecutors are expected to file additional charges as evidence from the facility continues to be processed and analyzed. Now consider the human dimension of what 92,000 pounds of a substance 13 times more potent than morphine actually means on the street. This is not an abstract statistic. The FDA has documented that 7-OH products are being marketed in fruit-flavored gummies and ice cream cone packaging, formats designed specifically to appeal to children and teenagers. These products are sold in gas stations, corner stores, and vape shops. They appear next to energy drinks and protein bars. A parent walking their child through a checkout line has no mechanism to distinguish a 7-OH gummy from a legitimate product without laboratory analysis. The FDA formally confirmed that the marketing strategy for these products deliberately targets younger consumers. What was sitting in that Palm Bay warehouse, 46 tons of it, was destined for exactly those retail channels, in exactly those packages, in states outside Florida, where the ban had not yet reached. This bust did not occur in isolation. One day before Brevard County announced Horvath's arrest, the FDA and the U.S. Department of Justice announced a coordinated national enforcement operation targeting illegal 7-OH products. That joint federal action seized 73,000 units from 3 separate warehouses across the country. The Palm Bay facility came the next day. The timing is not coincidence. The federal enforcement architecture was already in motion. This was a coordinated campaign executing across multiple states simultaneously, and the Overseas Organics warehouse was the largest single target in that entire network. From everything confirmed by federal partners, Sheriff Ivey stated publicly, "This is the largest seizure of this kind in the country. Nobody's ever been able to do this." Think about that. Not the largest in Florida. Not the largest this year. The largest of its kind in the history of the United States. And it operated inside a commercial building in a suburb of Palm Bay. Neighbors walked past it. Delivery trucks stopped there. It had a sign out front. The man running it lived with his grandparents down the street, who neighbors described as good people, people who had no idea that their grandson had built a 46-ton narcotics and weapons operation half a mile from their front door. This case is not just about Maxwell Horvath. It is about a vulnerability in the way modern criminal enterprises embed themselves inside legal commercial architecture. Overseas Organics was a real registered business. It filed paperwork. It received shipments. It used equipment consistent with legitimate botanical processing. The camouflage was not elaborate, it was mundane. And mundane camouflage works precisely because it does not draw attention. Criminal networks do not hide in darkness. They hide in the ordinary, in plain sight. In commercial strips where nobody looks twice. The 7-OH market exists because regulatory frameworks struggle to keep pace with the chemistry. The moment one compound gets scheduled, extraction technology pivots. A new derivative appears. New packaging. New distribution networks. The enforcement architecture chases the chemistry, and the chemistry is always one step ahead, until operations like this one close the gap. The weapons complicate the picture further. 5 IEDs and a .50 caliber on a tripod in a drug warehouse is not standard criminal infrastructure. That is not a dealer protecting his product. That is a level of armament that law enforcement agencies associate with something more organized, more prepared, and potentially connected to networks with objectives beyond retail narcotics distribution. That thread of the investigation remains open. What Brevard County, the DEA, and the ATF dismantled in Palm Bay was not just a drug operation. It was a manufacturing facility, a weapons depot, and a distribution network running under a botanical company's trade name. If this could be built and operated for months in a suburban commercial zone in Central Florida, the only honest question that follows is, where else is it happening right now? The investigation continues. Federal prosecutors are building the indictment. Evidence is still being cataloged. And somewhere in the supply chain that fed 92,000 pounds of narcotics into that warehouse, the questions of sourcing, financing, and distribution are still being answered. If this story stayed with you, if the scale of what was operating undetected in a Florida suburb concerns you the way it should, hit like and subscribe so these investigations keep reaching the people who need to see them. We track federal operations, criminal networks, and the real mechanics behind stories that deserve more than a headline. Tell us in the comments what time it is where you're watching and which part of this case stayed with you. Because this one deserves the conversation.